Okay, welcome to the last lecture in the course on teaching creative writing taught by me, Dave Lorden. This is our final lecture. It'll be a slightly shorter lecture, I think, and it's to do with finding work and with career development. And I'm going to share here a lot of my own experience with you. Again, the course has been really much about my own experience and what I've learned and why I'm still getting plenty of work, and indeed more work than I've ever got before, in a wider range of applications of creative writing, even though I'm kind of 20 years into it now. What I'm sharing with you here is how I keep getting work and what techniques I use, if you like, to do that. Before you get started looking for work, there's a couple of things you need to think about. I would rewrite my CV, focusing in it on my my commitment to creativity, my involvement in creativity, my involvement in teaching, education. If your intention is to work with young people or any kind of special group, put in whatever you have got in that regard. I would also include, this is a photo, not just photo, but photos of, perhaps your previous teaching experience, or certainly a personal photo, because people do like to see who it is they're inviting into their school or library or anything like that. I would also consider doing a video CV. That would make you stand out. Number one, it'd be, widely accessible. People could access it and look at it anytime they wanted. And perhaps the video can include, even some footage of you doing teaching and things like that. That kind of comes back to the, we talked a little bit again about multimedia today and about staying in the game and learning as much as you can about that. And that would be a good way to show the world out there that you are actually, up to the moment, I suppose, with this. Your references, now that might be a problem for some people if you haven't got a lot of experience. I would suggest that if you have no experience so far in teaching creative writing, that you ask a creative writing teacher who can you shadow them? Can you watch them? Can you go in and observe them at their practice and things like that? Can you even assist them a little bit? It'd be on a voluntary basis, obviously. But if you were to get in with a local teacher yourself and assist them, they would then be able to give you a reference, ongoing, because you do need references to do with teaching to get a teaching job, of course. If you don't have those type of references, you might have references from teaching English as a foreign language. You might have references from being a secondary English teacher or anything like that. They would do as a substitute. Another thing you might try is just volunteer teaching. I'll go into a little bit more detail about that, and there's advantages to volunteer teaching, but there's a couple of things you need to think about carefully in terms of collegiate relationships. Vetting, if you haven't been vetted, you need to get vetted. You can't get vetted personally, just as yourself as an individual. You need to be vetted through an institution. Now, a lot of the institutions that you might work for, schools and libraries and so on, will ask you to go through a vetting process again. It's no big deal, to be honest with you. It's gotten a lot easier to sort out in the last few years. It was a very awkward, drawn out process, which hadn't really been thought through. But no, it's not too bad. It doesn't take too long, but it's extra paperwork. You could join Create, which I recommend, as a community artist, as CREATE, if you're based in Ireland. And they can then do kind of a vetting for you that might cover a lot of different places, but vetting is going to be something that's coming up. It only refers, by the way, to convictions or trials that have taken place in the last 7 years or something like that. So. And of course, it's only kind of important if you had anything to do, anything on your record, shall we say, to do with violence or crime against vulnerable people or children. I would imagine that you don't have anything like that on your CV, so it's no big deal. And then I would also set up my Facebook page as a teacher. Don't use your profile too much. Set up your own page or possibly your own website. I'm not sure anymore there's as much of an advantage of setting up a website over just having a kind of a vibrant Facebook, presence. But that's where you would show off all your work, and advertise all your courses and so on and so forth. Okay, just one last thing that isn't up on the thing there, but it's to do with setting up as a sole trader. If you work as a self-employed person, you have to register in Ireland as a sole trader, and I'm sure people who are doing the course from other countries have similar rules. Make sure that your kind of tax affairs are sorted from the beginning. and that you are registered properly, and that any taxes you have to pay, you tax them and stuff like that, because it's not worth the trouble of getting hassled about that down the line. And it does happen, even to us kind of poor artists, the tax person does come after you, even if it's kind of petty at times. So have all of those in the fair, and you more than likely you probably won't be earning enough to pay much tax or any tax at all. For a few years with it, so don't worry, but just make sure you cover all those official lines, if you like. Okay. Now, I'm based in Ireland, but anybody who's outside Ireland can kind of adapt these for your own place, because you have similar institutions wherever you are, I'm sure. Okay. Now, institutions to approach for work. Now, a lot of work is through institutions, and when it's not through institutions, it's you'll impress people by the range of institutions that you've worked with, and you list your previous partners or current partners on your CV, and it will make you and people see that you work with a wide range of people, and that you're capable of designing courses and doing different courses with with different in different situations and with different client groups and things like that, and that makes you more likely to get work. So I would start off. Poetry Ireland, which is a charity organisation in Ireland, and receives some government funding, a very small percentage of which goes towards a Writers in Schools scheme. Which is only open to people who are, published writers. People in the creative writing industry in Ireland seem to put quite a lot of emphasis on this. There's very little work in this, in fact, because there's so many people trying to get work, and Poetry Ireland has their own, shall we say, stock of people that they give most of the work to. So you can register for this. Don't rely on it, though. Or in general, don't rely on kind of charity schemes or NGO schemes like that. I mean, literally NGOs are interesting organisations with their own interests to the fore, and that's important. Another thing you would do if you're going to deal with somebody like Poetry Ireland or the Irish Writers' Centre, or these national organisations, or indeed any organisation, but particularly organisations that rely heavily on government funding, if you're making a proposal to them, make 100% sure that you copyright that proposal and that you have record that it's your proposal, because there's several cases on record now of organisations in the literary organisations in Ireland and artistic organisations making funding applications with ideas that aren't their own, that have come in from somebody innocently making a proposal to them. So just be careful about that type of thing when you're working with institutions, because institutions are they're out for themselves, and they do rob people. So be careful about that, and always copyright and make sure that your ideas are your own, and that you can prove that. What I've got down there as ETBs, these are what we call education and training boards in Ireland, used to be called VCs. These are local community schools. And there's 10 or 15 of them in every county in Ireland. And every single one of them would have room for a creative writing teacher. So this is where I would go for my first job, to be honest, for most people. You contact your local community school, your local public school, your local school for the public secondary school, and you propose an evening class, or even a Saturday class, or whatever way they work it in your area, on general creative writing, which we've been covering in Lecture 4 and Lecture 5. So, that general creative writing, that introductory course, is where you're going to get your experience first. And if you had 1 or 2 nights of that a week, for the first year or two, you'd be doing fine, because you'd build up your experience. And another thing I want to say to people is, don't rush into this, because, don't take on 3 or 4 different client groups a week, at the beginning at least, because it's hard work, it's emotionally draining, it's intellectually challenging, and you'll be tired after doing 2 or 3 days of it, I guarantee it. If you have a day job, I'd say do maximum 4 or 5 hours a week in the evening times, and it's up to yourself. Desk schools, again, they're equivalent anywhere else, will be kind of disadvantaged schools, and they get a little bit of extra funding because they're disadvantaged, and often they will have a little budget for something that might build the self-esteem or the self-confidence of disadvantaged kids, and you might get a real good opportunity here, and I have several times, to work with smaller groups of kids whose literacy mightn't be great, and who might be a bit down in the dumps, and coming from difficult backgrounds and stuff like that, but massively rewarding work, to be honest with you, psychologically for the teacher, because they love telling their stories and things like that. So I mean, that's another option for you to look at. Private schools, total other end of the spectrum, again, they have money. You can be well paid for them, but the relationship between a teacher and a student in a private school is very different. You're basically owned by these students, and some of them are very conscious of that fact. So if you just be aware that they can be difficult in that way, private schools. But again, you get paid Private schools have a huge advantage in that they will have, all the facilities, in the world, and the kids themselves will have all the facilities at home. But in the schools, there'll be great computers and, a music room and all kinds of things you won't get in the less well-off schools. So that's a good one to go for as well. But can you put up with that type of young person? You think about that. Art centres, they're all over Ireland now. They were built by Fianna Fáil there in the noughties and in the 90s. Some of them are very vibrant places where there's plenty of work going on, and you're keen into a wider artistic community when you get in there. They're worth approaching. And others are just kind of jobs for the boys places around the country. So you check them out and send them in and see what they do. Look at the programme of these places. The Mermaid and Brae is a fabulous art centre, for example. The West Cork Arts Centre I've worked with down there in West Cork is a fabulous art centre. And there's really good arts centres around the country. They're not all great, as I said. Have a look at their programme, see if there's anything you can fit in, and make an approach to them. Even if all these places say no to you, at least they know you exist. And what often happened to me is I send in a proposal and turn it down in 3 months or 6 months and 9 months later I get a call back from somebody, so I put out plenty of proposals and plenty of, because you'll get 10% of them back. Create, I've just put down there, that's the organisation for community artists in Ireland. You'll have an equivalent. If you're not in Ireland, join up to that for the sake of the newsletter and job and stuff like that. Festivals, yeah, and not just literary festivals, by the way. You can do a creative writing festival, creative writing workshop at the ploughing championships, if you want to. And a lot of festivals have a wide program, with different arts and different types of workshops. You will have a festival in your townland or your village or your little local area. If there's not somebody already doing the creative writing workshop, just put a proposal into them. Most of you will get a bit of work out of that. Local libraries are enthusiastic to work with people. Probably best if you leave them for a while until you've built up a bit of experience and have a bit of a track record behind you, because libraries do look for good CV. I love working with libraries, to be honest with you. One of my favourite things, I like the space in the library, and I like the sense of sense of fun you can get in the library that you don't get in the school, for example. Hospitals and nursing homes, people might think, I'm having a laugh there, but no, actually, there's a lot of creative writing goes on in caring institutions now, right? And I've worked with Down syndrome people. I've worked with people suffering from, serious depression and other mental illnesses and so on and so forth. And they're all into creative writing, and creative writing can be a benefit of them. An awful lot of them have little stories they want to tell or little poems they want to tell. And your emphasis here, of course, is on kind of the palliative or well-being side of creative writing. And if you want to go down that road, I have plenty of ex-students that have done this course, and they're teaching in various places like that around the country. The last one I've got down there is the ICA, which is the Irish Countrywomen's Association, which I teach courses to now and then. Elderly ladies mostly who have brilliant memories from the countryside and want to preserve them. And that would be that's what I would do with them. So just be adventurous. I mean, I could go on listing here, but there's plenty, huge amount of organizations in institutions that might be open to creative writing courses that suit them. Okay, so before you send in your proposal, find out what they do, how your creative writing proposal fits in with what they do, and what it will do for them. Okay, what it will do for them, how it will enhance their reputation as service providers to their particular communities, and that's really important. And be sure to make your course descriptions. We're going to look at some of my course descriptions now for an example of something that stands out and is at the same time accurate. Okay, because that's important. That you can say people know what they're getting when they come in. Sometimes creative writing course descriptions can be vague, and that's a mistake. Okay. How to get work for the long term. We've kind of talked a little bit about starting off and getting going and who to approach. But of course, you want to be in it's something that you can earn, even if it's not your main source of income. Creative writing teaching can something that'd be quite a handy secondary source of income. That's also enjoyable, and that you're also developing in the long term. So, I've just a couple of things up there that are pretty obvious, but it's sticking at it, persistence, being dedicated to your job, and that means doing all those things we talked about, by doing all the research and making up your own, coming on to innovation, making up your own games, and it's simply that your lessons stand out. Okay, that you get a word of mouth, as it says down there in the green panel. Word of mouth is king. Okay, that you get a word of mouth reputation that spreads around as a really good provider of workshops, and then you end up turning people down rather than looking for work. And of course, that's where we all want to get. get to, and you get there by persistence, dedication, mostly by innovation. Okay, I think people should. That's reputation. It all comes together, as you can imagine. I've often advertised in the local press or online, used Google ads or Facebook ads, or any opportunity you get to kind of plug yourself, you should take it. A lot of those will be free, actually. Others you'll have to pay for. So but if you pay for advertising, you get to write it off your tax bill and all that kind of stuff. So you need to learn about that side of things, as I've said already. But definitely advertising, in a minor way. I'm not talking about on mainstream TV or anything, but local papers where you live and online is handy. Learn multimedia to stay in the game. Yeah, absolutely. If you want to, it's 2017 now. Things are moving really fast multimedia wise. Very much of my work now is multimedia focused or includes multimedia in the creative writing industry, and that's kind of where the cutting edge is at the moment. And you want to be at the cutting edge. Over time, build up your multimedia skills so you can teach video and podcast and poetry, film, and performance and all of those things, which are part of which are the main thing in the creative writing game today. Really, okay. Cultivate relationships with key institutional contexts. Yeah, I've several institutions. Not every institution I've worked with, I've got on with or stayed with. By the way, sometimes institutions own. For me anyway, their own kind of agendas would contradict mine long term, and I wouldn't stay involved. But there are certain organisations around the country that I really got on with and have really encouraged me. And the same will happen to you if you do a good job and people see that it's of benefit to them to keep you on and to bring you back and to maybe help develop you a little bit. Then you'll be flying it, so that's it. So build your social media profile. As I said, you got to let people know what you're doing and look out for any opportunities to make proposals. This means keeping an eye on the local calendar, really, what festivals are coming up, and how you can fit into them, what events are coming up, what new theatre is after opening in the local area, you're signing up to newsletters, in the creative writing field and in the creativity field and the arts field and the creative writing field in general. So that you know what because there's lots of people at different times looking for particular types of creative writing or jobs that would involve creative writing, and you'll find them in those newsletters. So keeping an eye out for those opportunities and making proposals as often as you can. How do you, building a portfolio and keeping people on over the years? Student retention through onward courses is one thing that you do. So at the Big Smoke Writing Factory where I work, we have a kind of a ladder that people climb, which is starting with beginners, then intermediate, and then onto advanced creative writing or genre and things like that. Okay, so if you are a good enough teacher, and I found that around half the students in every class, if they're really enjoying it, will take another course with me. That moves them on, not the same course again, but something that moves them on. And as I've said before, be careful of having the same students in your class all the time, because if you have one or two people that are coming for the fifth or sixth time, it's going to drag the class down a little bit, in my experience. So you don't bring the students back all the time, but you could bring them back for something that moves them on or something that they request. So you build up that student retention. And again, a lot of people that might have taken my offline courses in the past have gone on to take my online courses now, so they're all kind of part of my community as a creative writing teacher, and they're all kind of dig what I do, so maybe the same could happen with you. Yeah, so you're doing your general creative writing and you want to build up your portfolio, then you move on to teaching genre, and we talked a little bit about this already. You got to pick your genre. I'm not sure there's a huge market out there. People, again, I was teacher training a couple of weeks ago and down in Kilkenny, and everybody said they were going to teach the short story, and you have to really think about that. Do people really need to be taught the short story in a country where there's really only 2 magazines that publish them, and so on and so forth? But anyway, up to yourself. Teach whatever genre you want. I suspect there would be more people for it's kind of, we're in transition now at the moment, but I suspect in a couple of years' time the market for learning the short story will be quite small, and that for learning video or performance poetry or things like that might be quite large. But whatever your genre is, and your genre is the one that you're expert in yourself, that you're peer acclaimed in yourself, okay, that you've published or performed in yourself. Again, coming back to the ethics of it, it's really important not to try and teach something that you haven't done yourself, and that's why moving on to the genre teaching is a different thing to teaching a little class on a particular genre. If you're teaching a genre course, is different, and it requires that you yourself are expert in the field, really. Okay, moving down to kind of niche and specialist. These are open to anybody, with an interest, really, and they don't require, as the genre teaching does, kind of proven track record in publishing, generally speaking, okay, because they bring in other skills that aren't to do with publishing. So niche and specialist is where I do a lot of my work. as you'll see. For example, memoir for the over 55s, that's a really popular one. As is, by the way, multimedia for over 55s. I've been teaching that a while now with libraries, and the enthusiasm and the lack of baggage with over 55s is something I really love, working with seniors and teaching them how to make videos and all that sort of stuff. So that's out there. Memoir is something that over 55s like to do as well. Storytelling for self-confidence is something I've done in disadvantaged schools, I've talked about quite a bit, and with kids that are illiterate or have literacy difficulties, but are great talkers, or like talking, and most people like a bit of talk. So that's something I do quite a bit. Multimedia for beginners is something I would do a one day on for now and again, just to show people. Experimental fiction, I'll show you my all my blurb for that now in a second. And a new course I'm teaching now called Writing Through the Ancients, because I'm really interested in ancient writing and epics and history and stuff, like ancient history, and they have a lot of lessons to teach. So I mean, again, all of these courses are from different things I've done and different interests I have. So matching up your literary interests and your creative interests with client groups, and good courses that people are going to enjoy and get something from. That's how you build your portfolio. So again, we talked about it in the last lecture, but you get your three strands. You got your general and introductory courses, you got your genre teaching, and then you have your niche and specialist, where the world is your oyster, really. This is a growing field that people should keep an eye on. Okay. Some ethical and professional issues when it comes to, becoming a creative writing teacher. Now, we have big problems in the creative writing, shall we call it industry, maybe a field, if we want to feel a little bit better about it. But we have no union, and we've no prospect of one, really. It's herding cats, to be honest, trying to organise writers and artists. Our association, professional association, there's none representing writers whatsoever in Ireland. There's a couple that, represent themselves, as bureaucrats, who certainly don't represent writers in any meaningful way. So don't be fooled by that idea. There's no regulatory oversight. Nobody's inspecting whether the people teaching creative writing actually know anything about it. So ethical behaviour is kind of down to individuals in a collegiate way, okay? And we've got that ethical behaviour, for me, comes down to being accurate about and truthful about what you can teach. Number one. And number two, and this is as important in my experience, and this kind of probably doesn't go for people who are doing the course and are living in rural areas or smaller towns and cities, but certainly in the bigger places like Cork and Dublin and Galway. There can be, vicious competition, put it like that, for work in the creative writing industry. There's a lot of unemployment among postgraduates, and a lot of them do have a go at the creative writing for a couple of months. Now, I would be collegiate, and that would mean don't undercut people price-wise, okay? And we do need to talk a little bit about price. I mean, if you are starting out, and the VC will pay you, 35 or 40 euro an hour, by the way. But your private price for going into libraries or into schools, some flexibility, of course, not too much flexibility though. And what I charge is $250 for a half day and $400 for a full day. Maybe when I was starting out, that would have been $150 and $300 or something like that. But certainly no cheaper than that, because you're then the yellow pack person. Who is undermining their colleagues, frankly. And that's undercutting, and you get a reputation about that pretty quickly. And it's better, believe me, to have a good reputation among your colleagues, even if there is no union or association, than to have a bad one in the long run, okay? And cuckooing is basically, and this goes on, believe it or not, this goes on in the creative writing industry in Ireland, where people will have a look at it, people in the industry, competitors, let's call them, will have a look at the last school you went to, or the last library you went in. They'll phone them up and say, look, he's good, but I'm good too, and I'll do it for 50% cheaper or something like that. That's what I call cuckooing, the kind of thing that goes on. And again, what happens there is that the person in the library who's a sound person rings me up and tells me about it, and doesn't give the job to them, but probably gives me a pay rise. So it doesn't work, number one. Not accusing anybody out there of being like that, but just be aware that it's out there, and be very careful about how you approach things like that. Get vetted, yeah, very important to get vetted. Pain in the bum, unfair possibly that you have to give all this information to the police, etc. But we do have to take the children and vulnerable around, and do some child protection training as well, and if you're teaching kids, not only really because they talk about vulnerable adults as well as kids now, of course. So being aware of policies around that and having your own own policy and knowing the law around child protection and what to do if a child or an adult discloses, historical or present abuse to you. There's now a legal procedure that you have to follow as an educator, and you need to familiarise yourself with that. That's in Ireland again. I'm sure you have similar things no matter where you are. Okay, before volunteering, this is important. Be sure you are not doing anyone out of a job. Okay. Be careful. Like, I actually think you're better off going in with a professional teacher rather than going to a place like, say, Fighting Words. Great, they're teaching all those kids and stuff like that. It's my impression that the standard of teaching in places like that is not very high because of the volunteering thing, and the bar is way lower in terms of what you can get away with as a teacher in, say, Fighting Words or any charity organisation. So I think you'd be better off shadowing a teacher who's already a creative writing teacher in your area. Okay, but volunteer if you have to, but make sure you're not pushing out somebody who's getting paid. Youth Reach, you might know, is an organisation in Ireland that deals with kids who can't adapt to the normal mainstream secondary school system, and they need a bit of extra support, smaller classes, a second chance, that type of thing. And it's the type of work I like to do, and I do know often. And I remember a colleague of mine, a bit of a cuckoo as it happens, was on the Facebook boasting about how he was volunteering working for Youth Reach for free. And I thought, you're some idiot, really, because everyone else in that room except you is getting paid. The students get paid to go there. The teachers are certainly getting paid, and you're a fool, really, if you're not being paid in that situation, and you're also doing another person out of a job. So careful about that stuff. Again, as I already said, copyright all proposals you make to institutions, are minute and record all meetings you have. The bigger the organisation is, if you're dealing with a national organisation, I'd nearly take a friend with me to meetings, to be honest with you, because they're very, you don't rise to the top in Ireland, without, shall we say, Machiavellian principles, and I'm sure it's the same wherever you are. So all the time, it's good to work with institutions. They leverage a lot of money and a lot of support and stuff like that, but they're out for themselves. Remember that. So record everything. Consider team teaching. Yeah, that's quite important, I think. In the Big Smoke, we do quite a lot of that now. Whereas, Claire Hennessy, my colleague, does half the teaching for the DOA. The other does half the teaching. I noticed the Irish Writers Centre are taking up our idea now and doing kind of double classes where, people involved in a particular field, but maybe with different emphases of skill in that field, will teach one week and somebody else will come in the next week. Special guest teachers is another thing that I do fairly often. If I'm teaching experimental fiction, somebody who's just put out an experimental fiction book or whatever, I'll get them in to do one class. And, that's the kind of thing that helps to build the course and, makes it more special and more exciting for people taking part. So team teaching and special guests and stuff, that is something I also recommend. I'm going to show you a couple of my courses that have been really successful over the years, just for a look at, how I describe them and what they're about. So this is a Strange Times, Strange Tellers experimental fiction course. And if you look there, I'm talking about a unique way of making unique fictions, okay? Because experimental fiction is to do with really individual self-expression very much, okay? Clearly naming a few writers so that people can grasp what the course might be about. Calvino, Cortázar, Joyce, a few of the movements that are experimental fiction, Beats, Oulipo, Serious, who it's for. Adventurous, emerging, established writers, and multidisciplinary artists who wish to incorporate text into their own practice. What I'll be teaching: hoax fiction, cons of fiction, and ending up with a public performance of your work. And a lot of people have come in on that basis of, that attracts people, that public performance. And then underneath, who you are and what your track record is. How the hell are you teaching this? Okay, I can teach that because I've written experimental fiction books and edited anthologies and all that sort of stuff. So I can do that. So clear description, comprehensive, without going really much over the 150 or 200 words of who you are and how you qualified to teach it. That was an 8-week course, that's right. Here's the Words Aloud summer camp I'd run for the last 10 years or so down in West Cork. And very clear description again what's going to be performance rating, a contemporary world where multimedia technologies and performance rating are assuming more important alongside traditional book publishing, as well as covering traditional forms like poem, story and song. Words Aloud introduces participants to the essentials of YouTubing and online video production, etc. So I'm appealing to the kids and what they're into, and that is filled every year. It's 14 to 18 years. That's filled every year for 10 years, and I'm going back again next year. Very handy. And then who I am, and slightly different description of who I am, aim for the client group, website address, and as well as the West Coast, and then who I worked with in the past. Again, a list of my clients, and that's something that you want people to be able to see, that you've got a lot of previous clients and things like that. That's one that's working out for me. By the way, just going back there quickly to the Strange Times Strange Tellers, actually has sold out 8, 9, 10 times now at this stage. So it might look like one there wouldn't be too much demand on, but in a big city like Dublin, you can fly a flag like that, and if you're already well known enough, you'll get people. This is our Dublin Young Authors, which we do every Saturday. And again, a course description. This is the team teaching I'm talking about. And as I said, Claire would have a slightly different emphasis in the field than me. She's a YA editor, where I'm doing the poetry and the performance and multimedia and stuff. That actually works really well, because the kids get a good comprehensive, sense. Kids who are into books and kids who are more into performing and multimedia, and kids who are into both can all enjoy it. And what participants are doing, and we have our child protection policy up there now as well. If you're working with kids, you need to have a child protection policy, by the way. I've talked about that already. Here's a new course I'm teaching after Christmas, Writing Through the Ancients, with Dave Lorden, and again, something that I have a personal interest in, flying the flag on this one. Who knows, really, if it'll fill or not? I don't know. And I'm not, if it doesn't, it doesn't. Then you move on to something else. Or you might even try it again and see, was it just the timing or whatever. So, you try a few of these things, but they won't all work. And after you've done your while of the general creative writing teacher, then you move on to these particular courses, okay, that you have an interest in. Now, I've named people there: Fatatep, Homer, Sappho, Sophocles, Lao Tzu, and Anonymous, my favourite writer, or one of them anyway. These are all people that I've read and understood, and I'm enthusiastic about teaching, and students, telling what students will be doing, the aim of the course, so what the aim of the course is, and what's required for the course, okay, and so on and so forth, and who I am again, and a few links to the thing. And I'm not the world's greatest graphic designer, but a bad graphic it's an okay graphic design. It's something that gives people a kind of visual idea as well. Is not a bad idea, okay. And again, that you'll be able to do that if you learn the simple multimedia stuff. So that's really wrapping it up, these few words about finding work, looking for work, who to look for work from, how to approach work, what kind of CV you need, what kind of course description you need, how you need to protect yourself when you're dealing with institutions, particularly larger ones. I'll emphasize that point again, particularly in Ireland, where we have serious problems, as people know, with governance and transparency in organizations, and the larger they are, and the more funding they get, the worse that appears to be. So be careful of that. And all of that. So listen, that's all. I'm really, really delighted that everybody took the course. I hope you enjoyed it. Feel free to send me any kind of wrap-up questions to my email address, and do follow the YouTube channel. Do subscribe to the YouTube channel now, please, and follow it, because I plan to put an awful lot of further tips around creative writing teaching on there, and I want to build a community of people that are teaching creative writing and be part of that community, and I hope you want to be part of that community as well, because I do think we need to move forward together as well as individuals, and I'm sure that I can learn from you as time goes by, in the same way that I hope that you have learned from me, and hope that you benefit from my experience and my sharing of that, and I would like to benefit in return from your experience and your sharing of that. So please do keep in touch with me by my email, and by following me on my Facebook page, Dave Lorden Creativity, and follow me here on YouTube. I'd really appreciate that. Good luck in all your journey in creative writing, everybody. Hope it goes really well, and do let me know about it. Thank you.